And then the Republican and Democratic parties, if you look at them as a business, they're actually one of the largest grossing businesses out there. And how they are essentially, it's an oligopoly in the sense that there really is no competition outside of those two. And they're one of the biggest, if not the biggest, oligopolies in the United States.
Welcome to Contentious Talks, the weekly podcast where we talk to influencers, celebrities, politicians, and everyday people to show we all have unique opinions, and that's a great thing. I'm your host, Ryan Malinowski, and this week we're talking with John Gallo. How you doing, John?
Doing good. I'm doing good. Thanks.
Cool. So, who are you, John? What do you do? Where are you from? What are you passionate about? What do you have an opinion on?
You obviously know my name. I work for York College, Pennsylvania. I'm also an MBA student at the moment, halfway through my MBA.
Cool.
So, doing that at the moment as well. Live in York. Things I'm passionate about. I feel like that's tough. I feel like I'm not the most passionate of person, but I definitely have an opinion, if that makes any sense. I'm always passionate about environment and stuff like that. Hate politics, but love politics, I guess, at the same time. So,
because you hate politics, you
have
to love politics.
Yeah, exactly. So. Yeah. The hate of politics automatically means you like politics, I guess, right? So, there's that.
So, live in York. Did you say you work for York College?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Family?
I do. Yeah, that's true. I have a wife and a 13-year-old daughter.
Clearly an afterthought.
Yeah.
Hopefully she doesn't watch this podcast.
No, I'm sure she will not. Yeah.
It's like the environment and politics, but not politics is the most important thing to me.
Yeah.
And that's about it. That's all that's important about me.
That's all I care about. Yeah, as life. Yeah. And of course, family. I've also 2 dogs, 2 cats, got 2 pit bulls. I guess in that case, I like animals too. So,
okay.
I'm passionate about that. I'm not like some activist. So I feel like passion to me, if someone's passionate about something, I always think of like activist, which I guess is probably incorrect. Like, I like animals. Like, if someone tried to come into my house and to take my animal, I'd definitely beat the shit out of them for it.
Right.
So I guess that's passionate, right?
I think that's passionate.
Yeah. So I'm not like some super activist person either.
But you didn't drink the Kool-Aid or something like that, is what you're saying?
Yeah. I definitely not. I am not very good at drinking the Kool-Aid anyway. So.
Now you've started a few businesses in the past as well, correct?
Yeah.
So you talked about you were working on your MBA. Is that the end goal then, to own your own business eventually?
Yes.
Okay.
I miss it, to be honest. I had Tap and Attack, which was a gaming and hobby store. Sold board games, card games, all that stuff. Which I really enjoyed that, but there's really not since then, there's not money to be made in there, but at the time I didn't know how to make the money there. I feel like if I went back in time with what I know now,
sure,
I definitely could have done it a lot better, done things completely different,
right.
Made probably much more money. But even then, I still feel like we didn't do too bad. I just started off as an event, ran events, and grew it to we had over $250,000 in sales every year. So I feel like it's not for first go at it when you're in your young 20s. I feel like first business, it's not too shabby.
Yeah.
From nothing to $250,000 in sales.
So what were the biggest mistakes? What would you do differently?
Well, I think a lot of it would be inventory management. I don't think I was a very good manager then either. I don't think I'm the best now, which I feel like makes you a good manager.
Sure.
And the fact that you think you're not that great makes you better at it.
But you've learned some things.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Definitely would have been. Actually, one thing I've actually talked about recently in my one MBA class, I think we would have paid more.
Okay.
Which I think is
to your employees.
Yes.
Okay.
And for our cards and stuff too. Which I'll do one at a time, I guess. So paying the employees, we paid them minimum wage, which isn't the end of the world, but I think we should have paid them more. Really, because I think we could have called out more people then. Because there we always had, there's tons of people that wanted to work there.
Sure.
But I think if we'd have paid more, we would have got more of the people that were good and kept those people there.
Right.
So looking back on that, reflecting, I feel like we missed that. Also would have fired some people way earlier, or not hired them to begin with now, compared to what I did then. So I think there's like those aspects as well.
It's tough when you're working minimum wage, right?
Yeah.
If you go to somebody and say, hey, look, you're not doing your job, they pretty much say, well, okay, screw you. I'll go get another minimum wage job somewhere else.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Or I mean, you also just lose people because they can't make their bills, or like they have like we lost people because they had to move out and like their house. So, like, well, you can't live off minimum wage, especially if you're only working 30 hours a week. There's just no way. So I think we would have paid more to keep those good employees in that aspect. As far as like the cards as well, like we always sold products at a low price, so we always sold them at like market low, which at the time I thought it was a good idea because we could just like essentially get to the point where you have like you're hitting like economies of scale, I guess was my real thought. But you actually never really hit that with a secondary market, I don't think. I think you get more economies of scale from when you're actually producing things. Like you have like your own intellectual property, you have more opportunity to hit your economies of scale. So I think that was a mistake too. We should have raised our prices a little bit.
Who are you trying, like with that thought process of the economies of scale being brick and mortar, who are you trying to compete with there? Like you said, you're selling it at market low compared to what? What were you using as a metric?
So for that, there was websites we sold on too, which was like there's like third-party websites that you could sell yourself, kind of like an eBay type of thing, but not bidding. You just set your price. So we were always in the lower end of that. But I think because of that, like we would sell things quickly, but then you also have the problem you can't get things as quickly either. So like being with secondary market, you have to be able to buy stuff to sell stuff. So I think there's like a middle ground, which I think is probably the more optimal area. Excuse me. That you can get product easier, so you can turn it, but still have like a decent margin.
Yeah. Did you sell things at the brick and mortar location for the same price you were offering it up online?
Yeah, which I do think that's right. I think you can do that as a company, sell things at different prices like that. I just like ethically, I'm not really too okay with that personally. I always feel like you should offer the customers the same no matter where they are.
Sure.
I mean, assuming that they would pay shipping online, so like you technically would pay more, but you also could get free shipping if you bought enough. So like there's that give and take, because I think the online customer should incur some additional costs because there is additional cost for us. So yeah, but for the most part, the price for each individual item was the same.
So you would have paid more. What else was, mistakes that you wouldn't make again type of thing?
Funding was a big one. We didn't have money. So I don't think that was necessarily wasn't. Well, I guess it was my mistake too. I should have took money out to start the business more.
So you didn't invest any of your own capital into it?
Not much.
Okay.
So my partner at the time, he invested most of the money, because he was actually the one that really wanted to start the retail store. I was more on the event side. But one of the problems was like we had an investment of like $10,000, I think it was, and then once we got started, they ended up pulling out like $5,000 of it. Okay. Which, I mean, if starting a retail store at $10,000 is not ideal, let alone $5,000. So that kind of shortchanged us in that aspect.
So there was a business plan then?
There was some sort of business plan, but it wasn't the best.
So your partner invested $10,000, and is that what you said?
Yeah.
And then he pulled $5,000 out at a certain threshold.
Yeah, no, it was not. It was like a month in to the retail store, so it was early on.
Gotcha.
Which I think, and once again, like I feel like we still would have probably mismanaged it to some degree, but I think we would have been better off.
Yeah. Now, $5,000 to a lot of people is a lot of money, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's still a lot of money to me.
Well, but from a business perspective, $5,000 like nothing from a business perspective.
Yeah, we were ended up doing $250,000 in sales. $5,000 at that point is not too much, but when you're starting off, we could have definitely used that. It's definitely a downfall, I think, in that regard. And I feel like I should have probably took out a loan as well. Especially, I think, like, probably year one, I probably should have took out money to reinvest into the business.
Right.
Because we were, like, struggling, even after the first year, we were struggling to get money. So I think I probably could have done that to keep it moving more.
Right on.
Yeah. but like I said, I think probably part of the reason was I'm just like so inexperienced.
Okay.
But in all reality, though, I have my bachelor's degree now. I've got an associate's in business, bachelor's in business, getting my MBA. And honestly, the amount of stuff I learned from my business, and I lost, even he lost, a few thousand, I lost a few thousand by the end of it, really. Because I did put money in, and I built up debt because I was essentially dumping anything I had into it.
Sure.
So I still was in the hole thousands of dollars by the end of it. But I think, honestly, that there's like 5,000 I lost and the 5,000 he lost. At least for me, it was probably the best $5,000 I've ever spent. Like even my whole entire bachelor's degree, I don't study at all. Even my MBA, I don't study too much because I've learned so much from that $5,000 experience. That the college stuff has been essentially like a joke for business because I've learned so much. Because you have to.
Yeah.
I had to file taxes. I had to file. Hire employees, learn all the state laws and all that stuff like that, and marketing. And I didn't do it very well then, but I learned how to do it, and then improved upon it from there.
Once you get your MBA, do you have a plan for a business you want to start? Like, what's the dream?
My real business idea. I'm tossing around a bunch of different things because I still have about a year to go. But one idea I've been tossing around, at least I keep thinking about it, is doing more of a game of an integrated. It's almost like a murder mystery type thing. So my thought was doing something where it'd be online murder mystery, but it'd be more kind of geocaching in a sense. So you could go out and you'd be part of the world, and it'd be all kind of like an escape room type thing.
Okay.
But it'd be more based on where you are. So you would go out and find clues that are out different places.
Okay.
The biggest thing I struggle with is trying to hit how would you either monetize and hit the economies of scale for that. So the idea would be that you would have this thing you could integrate between the website that you go to sign up or app, and then you could go to Facebook and it'd be through there. So you'd have essentially fake people that have their own pages on Facebook. It'd have to be they have rules, certain rules you have to follow for those type of things. So then you would you could get clues from there and get clues from other places. Then you could actually go to a physical place that's near your location that would have different clues. And I was thinking either ways of integrating it into advertisements, so you could have different you could go to a bar and they'd have a clue at the bar that would give you towards this game, and then the whole point is you just try to solve this murder mystery.
Gotcha.
And that's one of the ideas I've been tossing around. That's the one I keep coming back to, at least. I think there is some type of market for that type of thing, where it'd be kind of a web / something that kind of just blends the internet with the real world.
Yeah, it's almost like a game that fits in to the Internet of Things kind of idea.
Yeah.
But getting people to interact with one another, and
Yeah.
It reminds me of old school computer games where it's go find this man that you talk to at the start of the game that you don't even remember anymore.
Yeah.
He should be in this town by now, type of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but it'd be a real person now, or it could be. You could even have things there's technology now that's beacons. So beacons would be essentially it's based off I think it's high frequency Bluetooth. So it's for newer phones and stuff like that you could trigger when you're in a certain proximity. So you could even do things like that. So you go to this place, and then that would trigger this interactive part of this app, the app that you'd be on.
Right. You could almost this would be really cool too if you had you got people to be actors in it.
Yeah.
Right? And then it's just like signing up for Uber. You have an actor in the game, and it's a real world actor.
Yeah.
That can give you a custom clue, and you just share it via your phone, type of thing.
Yeah.
And a way you could monetize it is you could tell the actors then, look, you need to go to this you need to go to this place. It's a store if it's the day, or it's a bar at night, and the bar or the store pays you to have the actor there so that people have to come, and the idea is they'll buy things while they're there.
Yeah.
Or maybe you make that part of the quest. Go buy a beer at this bar, and you could have the same actor in every city or town or location or whatever. That would be cool. It's a cool idea.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought about that too. Like, essentially, bars. That was my me. I thought it was bars. I feel like it's going to be that like 20 to 30 age range would be people that be interested in that. So you could go to the bar, and like the barkeeper could give you the clue, even, or whoever it is. So, yeah, I think it'd be interesting. Monetization, I think, would be the hard part, and scale. Because I feel like you'd have each individual stories. So I plan on testing it soon-ish. Next year or so. Just making like real simple, like 12-step clues. Like, kind of like escape rooms do that thing. Like they map out their clues and everything. And doing it like in the New York area.
Right.
Just as a test. Because, there's no way. I feel like these smaller cities like this would be harder to monetize. But I feel like New York could definitely, like, these places like those huge cities, you could definitely make enough money from just the sheer volume of people.
It depends on what you're charging for the advertisement, right?
Yeah. That's would be the...
If you're talking economies of scales, you make it extremely cheap, right? Because there's no guarantee that... It depends on how many users you have then, too, right? You could almost have them set a budget, and every time that clue is given out to somebody, it charges towards their budget type of thing. And when the budget's over, you tell the actor or whatever, you close off the waypoint or whatever type of thing programmatically, and the actor has to move to a new location that's actually making your app money.
That's true. I didn't think about necessarily you could have the story almost be adaptive to based off of ad revenue and stuff like that.
Right, because if you have a scene in a bar, it doesn't matter what bar you're in.
It's true. Yeah.
Right? And there's 100 bars in the 4 counties in this area at least type of thing. So if you get people driving, and then you have like notifications like, oh man, so-and-so, the guy you're trying to get to, it just sends an automatic text then or something when the waypoint's closed to say, hey man, I'm leaving this bar and I'm going to another one type of thing,
Yeah, that's a good idea.
That's a cool idea, man. Cool. I hope that happens for you. That's a pretty sweet idea. You're talking about how you learned way more from just trying a business, right?
Yeah.
Than you did from your associate's degree or your bachelor's or even the master's, the MBA that you're going through. Is that correct?
Yeah, to a degree. The MBA, I think, is different. There's a lot of aspects I learned. The bachelor's, I feel like I learned more from the business than I did my bachelor's. There's like some areas, of course, there's like tidbits you learn here and there. Sure. But like the overarching bachelor's of business, I definitely learned a lot more doing my own business than I did from the bachelor's program. I had like a 3-point something GPA. I don't even remember what my bachelor's was, but like essentially, I never studied, like didn't work hard at all because I literally just knew it all. There was times I got arguments with my teachers because I knew more than they did about the subject.
Sure.
From the business. Then the master's, though, it's a little bit different. There's a lot of it still the same, but it's just master's, you just go more in depth. And right now, it's a lot more about like corporate financing and stuff like that. It's where I'm learning more. So it's like stuff that really wasn't as relevant. Like we weren't issuing stocks and bonds for Tap Tech by far.
Right.
We were nowhere near that level, or like we didn't have like policies for like trying to influence government and stuff like that. Where that's what more of a master's is trying to get into, like assuming you're running a corporation or a large corporation. We were a corporation, but not like $250,000 in sales is really not too much for a business, really.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and there's plenty of businesses out there that do $250,000 and they make zero profit, right?
Yeah. That's what we did, really.
Right.
At the end of it.
Right. Because so you're talking gross, and
yeah.
Anybody who knows about business or people who are trying to get into it, the real thing you want to look at if you're doing sales is profit.
Yeah.
Because that tells you what your company's worth and whatnot. If you
Yeah.
make $1,000 in a year, but you spend $1,000 on materials and salaries and stuff like that, you made no money as a business every year. So
Yeah. That was our...
And that just scales up. You make $1 billion in a year, and you spend all your money on materials and salaries and insurance and all the other expenses, and you made no money as a company.
But until you get into a corporate, if you get $1 billion in sales, though, sadly, your company will actually go up in value still. I was actually learning about, that's one thing we were learning about in corporate finance. Essentially, there's ways you can leverage your debt and stuff so that you can make no money on your company, make less money, be worse off as a company, and still have a higher valuation.
Right.
Which, I mean, still fucking blows my mind that that's the thing. That, like, you essentially can run your business worse and you can be worth more.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, when you're a small company, that's not how that works with small companies. Small companies actually have to make money, which is crazy, but it is what it is.
So what I was going to ask you is, if you learn more from business, from actually doing the business, why have you continued down the education path if your goal is eventually to be back in business?
So, I mean, the bachelor, honestly, I started my associates before Tap and Attack, and then at Tap and Attack, I stopped doing my associates because it was, I was there 12 hours a day, probably, almost. And it was almost 7 days a week, so it was just too much to do it. Plus with the family, I was still married and had Kaylee at the time, which is my daughter. So after that, after we closed down that, I did a little bit of actually consulting to a degree. I worked for SavePoint, and I did consulting for him, and then after that, for trying to get him managerial-wise better, and trying to help him the mistakes I learned, essentially. And then after that, I went to York College, and once I got to the point where I became a full-time employee there, which was actually about a year into it, I became a full-time employee. They pay for your bachelor's.
Okay.
So I was like, well, to me, I didn't like my salary there, really. So I just assumed that as part of my salary, which I think is probably fair. So, I saved like $10,000 a year just on going to school. So, to me, that's salary. I made X plus 10 grand. It's, less 10 grand in debt. So I did that, and then my master's, I really wanted to get my master's because I think for my next phase, I'd like to do business, but I want to do it better. Like I said, I didn't really learn too much in my bachelor's, so I felt like master's was the logical step to learn more. And so that way the next business I start, I can actually make it to hopefully something big, which hopefully I will. Yeah, that's the goal.
Okay. So the education kind of came along essentially for free, or significantly reduced.
So York paid for all of it. I paid like $400 a semester, plus my books, which as far as education goes for a bachelor's, that is as cheap as possible.
Right.
But even my master's, I'm doing my master's for them too. They pay for half. So even there, I'm like,
right.
I feel like coming out of college with a master's degree in business, especially for I think it's gonna be 10 grand in debt. I feel like I can't bitch about that too much.
Yeah, no.
10 grand for MBA is pretty good.
Right on. So we were talking briefly before the podcast started that you're registered libertarian. You mentioned you don't like politics, but because you don't like politics, that's kind of a political thing. And
that
exactly. Means you have to like politics. Talk to me about why you registered libertarian, kind of what you think that believe on that side of things.
Actually, one comment about the political side of it is I actually had started a business, really a side hustle. It's not really a business, but I started selling political signs. I'm not sure if you knew this or not. So I sold political signs during this last election, but they weren't real political signs. So I sold fake ones. It was vote Sasquatch and vote Seymour Butts and stuff like that. But it actually sold a fair amount. Especially I literally started it months before the election and just kind of tried to ride the wave up a little bit.
Right.
So that was I guess that's my political stance. Is that no political stance. It's literally just to have a joke about it.
Poking fun at it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the reason I registered libertarian really, and I was always more libertarian-esque, I guess, is because, I feel like the country as a whole needs a three-party system. I think that the tug of war between the two doesn't help anybody. So I think having three would benefit the country more. And the libertarian, I think, is the most prominent of the third parties.
Okay.
So that's really why I registered libertarian. That I just don't like. I actually listened to Freakonomics podcast. Not sure if you're familiar with that podcast at all, but they actually did a whole podcast about the Republican and Democratic Party. And in the Republican and Democratic parties, if you look at them as a business, they're actually one of the largest grossing businesses out there. And how they are essentially, it's an oligopoly in the sense that there really is no competition outside of those two. And they're one of the biggest, if not the biggest, oligopolies in the United States. I mean, even like everyone thinks of oligopoly, which I need to explain what an oligopoly is.
Why don't you explain?
Okay, all right. So an oligopoly, there's monopolies, which is like Comcast, where monopoly is there's just one company. I feel like most people know what monopoly is. An oligopoly is when the whole entire market is controlled by a few companies. Most people think of Coke and Pepsi. Coke and Pepsi, I mean, if you think of soda, you think Coke and Pepsi. There's only two options. You go to McDonald's, or a restaurant, you get Coke or Pepsi. There's no like really in between. But
you just insulted like half of the Pacific Coast.
Yeah. Well,
there's somebody out there going RC Cola, man.
Yeah, if we look at market share, there's not much. But even then, though, the Republican and Democratic Party are a much bigger oligopoly than Coke and Pepsi, because there is other competitions. I mean, they actually have a third competitor, which would be the Snapple Dr. Pepper, I think it is. I know it's
not sure.
Yeah, Snapple and who else they're partnered with, they're the other third party in there. I mean, they still only own a small percentage of the market share, but they are the third party.
Right.
But they own more than 1% of the votes, essentially, than what the Republican, Democratic, and Libertarian Party has.
Right.
So, and in that regard, there's an easy entrance for an additional soda. Like anybody can start a soda company, and you'll probably end up being bought out by Coke and Pepsi. But that's not necessarily a bad thing as far as business. But in the political aspect, there's really the barrier to entry is almost impossible. I mean, you have to have billions of dollars or millions of dollars at the very least to even consider being a political party. And even at that point, you're still not going to do well unless you have billions. So the Republican and Democratic Party, that's why they say that essentially they're the biggest oligopoly, is that the Republican and Democratic Party, there's no way to get into it. You can't start your own political party. You don't really have an easy way to start, someone small to start it and grow in a political party. So, and there's no competition. It's only the Republican and Democratic parties. The Libertarian, I think they got 1% of this last vote, something like that.
Something like that.
I mean, as far as considered in business sense or really in sense, 1% is like a joke.
Gary Johnson actually did a lot better last time around. But that's just because I think both candidates were so unlikable. And well, there were big question marks on one side on how like the one side would vote, right, or would run policy, and then the other side was just like the least likable candidate ever.
Yeah, exactly.
And Gary Johnson was able to scoop some of the vote out from each side, but I think even at his highest, he was still in the single digits.
Oh, I think overall he was like 2 or 3%, wasn't he?
I don't remember.
Something like that. It was low.
He did better than Joe Jorgensen.
Yeah. So I mean, I think in that regard, even 3% of the market for something is nothing. I mean, right. As far as that regard, especially in something that big, if you had 3% of the soda market, you'd still be doing pretty well. I mean, which the Libertarian Party, I guess, still isn't. I mean, they're doing better than anybody else is, but still not good. You can't win an election at 3%.
So, what attracted you to the Libertarian Party? Is it just because they had more market share than any of the other little parties out there?
To a degree. So I mean that's definitely a big driving force. I think what we talked about briefly before is that I feel like I am definitely a fairly moderate. I pull things from other things. I definitely like the Green Party aspects where they have. They're just more environmentally safe. I definitely like that aspect. I think the big thing for the libertarians that pull for me is that's more localized state government. So I think that's my big thing. Okay. I think that the federal government, should be good for some things. And like I think with like the I don't know, the Libertarian Party? No, I guess it's just the Democratic Party. No, whatever they are. The Democratic Party, the left side, they're all about like universal health care and stuff like that, which I think actually makes sense because insurance and stuff like that is really just you're playing odds. So I think having the bigger pool would make sense for that. If you're a casino, you want to have as many people playing your casino as possible. That's how you level out your odds. You have less swings with as far as your costs and stuff like that. So universal health care, I think, for that in that regard would make sense. At least at base level. I think there should be additional stuff. But the Libertarian Party having a lot of the government rules being more centralized makes more sense to me. So I think this thing is dumb that Oregon's now you can go do meth in Oregon and it's legal, but you can still get arrested for it because you're breaking federal laws, which I think is just stupid. Like it should just be if Oregon wants to let you do meth, let Oregon let you do meth. Like that should be more of what it's about. But I think the federal government should be more for broad stroke things that benefit everybody in some regard. Like it's like healthcare. Like I think having universal healthcare would help everybody to some degree, at least marginally. I don't think there's no perfect solution. I feel like in any type of broad sweeping type of regulation, but I think most things like that would make sense, especially since you're required. Like even like car insurance, I feel like I don't know if it's just a Pennsylvania thing that requires it, but like things like that where it's like you must have insurance on your car in Pennsylvania for the other person.
I think all states at this point require some level of insurance.
Yeah. So like the federal government handling that aspect to me makes sense because then when you have there's a positive and negative of having a business run those things where the business has to make a profit where the government doesn't, but then the business also creates more innovation. But as far as insurance goes, there's not really much we can innovate on. Like you're insured or you're not. So I think the government handling those things where they don't have to innovate because the government's definitely not good for that. They're not known for their speed and changing of things. They're pretty slow at everything. But having the government handle broad sweeping things that require very little thinking involved, I think would be a benefit. So that's why I feel like I'm kind of in the middle because I feel like I pull aspects from everybody, but I feel like I'm definitely more libertarian in the sense of small government, I guess.
Yeah, so you're not full-blown libertarian in the sense that 100% anarchy, that type of thing.
Yeah. Gotcha. No. I think I always think it's crazy. The people I always feel that like anarchy, which I always feel like it's I don't know if it's more left-sided, or libertarian, depending on the side. But I always feel like people that want more anarchy are usually lower wage people, whatever reason. That could be a little bit biased. But I always feel like they would not benefit from that. Same with the people that wanted to get rid of the dollar. I don't know if that's even a real thing. People wanted that to actually happen, but getting rid of the dollar and going back to a bartering system would only help the rich. At least in my opinion, it would, because they're the ones that would have more negotiating power, more than they have now, because they would have more resources, so you could utilize those resources to a greater extent.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I also think no matter if you got rid of the dollar, really we would formalize into some type of system anyway. There's always going to be a currency of some sort. And I think it'd just be more complicated if you got rid of the dollar.
So you're talking about universal health care. You're saying how it would be good in your opinion, for the federal government to have control over that because it's just playing the odds. And to have a bigger pool of people putting into insurance makes sense because then everybody benefits from it because everybody's tied to it essentially. Am I paraphrasing what you're
pretty much?
Am I getting what you were saying?
Yeah.
But then almost immediately you did make a statement that said, well, not everybody would be in it. And you said something along the lines, the way I understood it, of not everybody would be in it. Not 100% of people would be in it, right?
In the insurance pool?
In the insurance pool.
No, I think having 100% of people in it would be good. I think having an additional Like there should be I think a baseline insurance would be good, and then you can add to it. So like kind of how I guess Obamacare kind of does it to a degree, but instead of having, I have insurance in my work, so if my work wanted to offer insurance, like additional insurance, that makes sense, or essentially have upgraded or the ability to upgrade your plans. To something a little bit better to mitigate some of your people's risk. Like my mom has rheumatoid arthritis and stuff like that. So her having the ability to have things that cover those things more might make more sense. So I had tiers or something like that. But once again, I'm not an insurance person,
Sure,
for sure. But I think having some type of the ability, I think having a broad sweeping free healthcare overall would probably not be ideal, I guess, per se.
Yeah, so that's definitely not libertarian there, right?
No. Yeah, exactly, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, the libertarians would say, well, good luck, buddy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who pays for the health care then?
I mean, taxpayers do.
Okay.
I think that's most people already have insurance, or you have you're required to have insurance. I haven't had to do Obamacare or whatever for probably 10 years or something like that, but whenever it came out, we were on it for 6 months, and then we got insurance for employers. We were paying for that insurance one way or another, so I think just kind of mitigating it across everybody would make sense, because insurance really is odds. They're just trying to, when people get their insurance dropped or your insurance premiums go up or whatever, they're just trying to mitigate their risk over a large portion of people. But the being able to lower or broaden that scope would just be able to lower that premium overall. At least that'd be the ideal plan. I've never done math on it, but
so I definitely get that for someone like your mom who deals with a condition that she has. Obviously, the insurance is going to be worth it for her.
Yeah.
But what about for someone who's not sick, their family has no history of anything, they just have always looked at insurance as an extra incurred cost that they really aren't going to use or need. Maybe any medications that they have are cheap enough because there's a generic version out there that it just doesn't do anything for them, and frankly, if they need to go to the emergency room, they're cool paying a couple $100 out of pocket to figure that stuff out. I mean, how does that work into a universal healthcare system?
Well, I feel like with any type of universal system, there's always going to be winners and losers to a degree. But the point would be to make the losers lose less, I guess, in that sense, on both ends. That'd be at least the end goal would be for both to lose less. So that people that don't utilize insurance, they still, even at this point, they're required to have insurance. And when they don't have insurance, it all goes. If something tragic does happen, where you have a major car accident or something like that, they have to pay for it in some way, shape, or form. So I think having just broad sweeping the healthcare, I guess, in that regard.
Well, so you're not required to have insurance anymore. Now that they repealed, I'm pretty sure now that they repealed the individual mandate.
Oh, okay.
You're not penalized for not having insurance.
Yeah.
So that kind of broke what Obamacare was trying to accomplish. Yeah. I guess what would be your pitch to somebody in that situation? Because there's a lot of people who feel like they don't need insurance, or now that the individual mandates repealed, they've gotten away from insurance. They don't have it. Mm-hmm. Obviously, a universal healthcare system is going to work better if you have all 350 million people in the country in it, versus having whatever. Even if you don't have, even if it's only half of that, right? Yeah. So what would be your, I guess, pitch to that person to say, hey, it's a good idea to have this thing that you're never going to use?
Yeah. Well, so I think the big positive would be is that hopefully you get to the point, because I think with health insurance in general, people that have health insurance normally would do their more, for the most part, I mean, of course, there's always going to be outliers and stuff like that. They are more likely to do the preventative measures. So, women are more likely to get like mammograms, and men are more likely, older men get prostate, do like your physicals and stuff like that, that's where we catch a lot of your issues that you have before they get too bad. Like you can catch cancer before it gets too out of control, where you're going to start incurring hundreds of thousands of dollars in health insurance costs. Sure. So the goal would be, I think the real goal would be that more people go do those things that mitigate the risk overall, which then could bring health insurance down for everybody, including that person. I still think there would still have to be co-pays of some sort, because I think that there's always those people that go and they do, like, they go to the ER for everything. Like, I always feel like that's stupid, because like you don't go to the ER because you sprained your ankle. Like, you should go to your doctor or something like that. Whereas I think like having like co-pays kind of mitigates that to a degree, so that not everyone just goes there all the time. So I think that would be like a way to abuse the system. So I think the goal would be for someone that doesn't go to the doctor a lot or doesn't need the things as much, is that it really isn't going to benefit them as much, but when they need it, it'll be there. And I think most people that don't have health insurance are normally less well off, I think, in general, and then that would help mitigate their risk in that regard. And I also think it would be a sliding tier as far as like payment, just kind of how it is now, or where it was with Obamacare and stuff. Whereas like the real like poor people would get either free or essentially cheap healthcare with the co-pays, and then it would kind of slide up a little bit from there to kind of cover their costs.
Gotcha. So the appeal would be more on an educational side of things, to say, look, this is really a smart thing to do. It's not rational if you can afford it to not have something like this, because obviously with insurance you don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, and there would be like people, like Jeff Bezos doesn't have to worry about going to the doctors, but he also is not going to care about paying $500 a month or something. I mean, I feel like there would definitely be like most taxes where it's kind of, there's a sliding scale.
Yeah, well, Jeff Bezos could too also just pay out of pocket, so he's a guy you'd want to convince as well.
Yeah, but I think
he would probably fall in line just from the stigma of it, to not hurt his business or something along those lines, because it's an extremely low cost for him to incur, right?
Yeah, which I think that's what most wealthy people, I think in general, would take. They have insurance for everything for the most part. I mean, they're going to insure their houses, going to insure their boats, they're going to insure their everything else. So like, I think for the more wealthy people, they're already incurring those costs anyway. Right. So to them it makes sense. But I think, and even like middle class people in general already have insurance to some degree, for the most part.
Yeah. I mean, most I would be. I don't know the exact statistics, but I would assume most middle class people, especially if they have kids, they have insurance. I imagine the rate of the rate of people who were insured pre-Obamacare in the middle class was pretty high already.
Yeah, because most works give you insurance of some degree, especially like more stable jobs. So
right.
Yeah, so I think just it wouldn't. I don't think giving universal health care would even really change things too much. I think the real benefit would be just for the poorer people that don't have insurance, and then they would get the ability to go do preventative measures that would then incur those costs. Because I think really, like, we have that poor person that doesn't go get checked, and then next thing they know, they pass out because they have like prostate cancer. That $150,000 they incurred on because of like chemo and stuff like that, because the hospital will still probably treat them for most things. Yeah. Or if they had a bad car accident, that goes back to the taxpayers anyway, at least in some way, shape, or form. Either it goes to the hospital, which then the hospital has to incur that debt, and then the debt goes to the government because of that. So sooner or later that all kind of trickles back into the economy, and we're paying for it anyway. But so I think just getting out of the way, and hopefully having those people that don't have the ability to go to get those checks, letting them go in and get a check beforehand, find out they had prostate cancer early, then not have those costs incurred as high, would help society as a whole.
Do you have something to say? Then consider being on the show. Go to contentioustalks.com/guest and apply today. That's contentioustalks.com/guest to apply. Now back to the show. Right on. Well, thanks for sharing all that personal information, your wisdom, what you've learned over the years. What we're going to move into next is called the Top 12. Okay, so it's 12 questions, 3 categories, 4 questions each category. Presumably, it's everybody's favorite part. Okay. Every single one of my guests answers these questions. So the first category is politics. All right, John?
Yep.
First question in politics. What is a fair society?
What is a fair society?
A fair society.
I mean, that's tough. Because I think that, I'm not one of those people that believe in fair, necessarily. I don't think life is fair. I'm not, I guess that's the libertarian part of me, that you should be more free. Free is more fair than anything. So I don't think there actually is necessarily a fair society. I think that a fair society would be more about like equity and just having the ability for somebody to do whatever they want. So I feel like systemic racism and stuff like that would not be part of a fair society. But I don't think that's not really a possibility per se. I don't think fair is part of human nature or even nature in general. Like, that's just not something that can actually happen. There's always going to be winners and losers, and that's just unfortunately life. There's life and death. There's a positive and negative to everything.
You would fall in line with the idea of equal opportunity, not necessarily equal outcome.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's politics. You made it through one section. Up next is philosophy. First question here in philosophy: what is truth?
Oh man, that's a tough one. So, one thing I actually got into fairly recently was more like Buddhism stuff. Okay. So, I actually went to a monastery for a while and everything.
Oh, cool.
And so, I think with doing more research as far as like Buddhism and those things, I think that's helped me realize that what's true is not always true. Like, just like as a kind of like what's good is not always good. So I think truth is really fairly subjective. I think that it depends on your point of view, it depends on the perspective, depends on the situation, what is true. So I think truth is not a solidified thing that this is always true. I think it's more of a situational, fluid dynamic for truth, I think, for the most part.
Do you believe in, well, follow-up question here, do you believe that there is any universal truths?
Yeah, I think so. Universal truths, I think, would be less of like the human aspects of things, so less about like what's right and what's wrong there's no universal truths, I don't think, as much for there. As much as I feel like we want it to be. Like, do I think that like pedophilia is ever okay? No. But does it like inherently make that true? I don't think that inherently makes it true. I think that just makes it true for me. And I think it's one of those things where it's hard to gauge on what is actually true. So it's hard to know what is going to be true for you. It's not necessarily true for someone else, but I think like there are universal truths like life and death. Like, you can't avoid those things.
Last one. This we haven't talked about a lot, or a whole ton yet, but personal and religious questions. Okay. So first question here under personal and religion: what do you believe about God?
As far as God goes, I used to be more religious. My parents we were always Christian, always went to church, did all that fun stuff. I went to church all the time. I've actually fell out of religion when I was probably like 15, I'd say. Somewhere in those like formidable years, I guess. So that's when I really stopped believing in all of that. Because I just saw that, like, the harm that it does as well. So that was my big reason that I kind of stopped believing, that I felt like if there was an actual higher power, that like a God figure of some sort, that I feel like they would not be doing the bad things that they do, or like punishing people as far as that regard, nor supporting that punishment from other people. So I think that pushed me away from God. Like I said earlier, I started doing like Buddhism stuff. So I started researching that, and I went to a monastery, which that I definitely started leaning towards that more religiously. But even then, Buddhism is not actually a god; he's just a person that was like essentially got enlightened and did all that stuff. But I don't think that
all that enlightenment stuff.
Yeah, all enlightenment stuff. Like, I mean, it's like all that stuff. I think like there's something to be said for it. Do I think that there's this? I mean, place that you just ascend to? I don't necessarily know if I believe that per se, but I think the teachings that are behind Buddhism make sense. Where it's like about like equity and that we're all connected and everything kind of matters and those type of beliefs. So. I don't know if that even really answers your question, but that's kind of my tangent, I guess, about it.
All right, right on. Next question here under personal religion. What do you think happens after death?
After death, obviously I don't know, never been dead, at least not that I know, but I think I'm a two-option person. I think there's either we die and we're dead, just like people don't believe that, like, no one ever thinks that your cat dies and your cat goes to heaven. I don't think that's necessarily a thing. The only other thing I would slightly believe would be like a version of like reincarnation. The only reason I really believe that is because like reincarnation would be to the sense that like, if I die today and like you bury me in the ground over whatever, like centuries, like the worms will eat me. The worms then go into like get eaten by a bird. The bird then goes and gets eaten by something else, and then sooner or later, that like what makes me slowly gets reincarnated into something else. Like the fact that I die, become eaten by a worm, then like it slowly just kind of like those cells become cells for something else, so you actually become part of something else, which kind of goes back to the interconnected part where like we're all kind of this big organism that's just really functioning. So I think that's kind of what I probably lean towards that to a degree, but it's not like reincarnation in the sense that like I die and wake up a bunny rabbit, but it's more of that like I die today and I will become part of the ecosystem that could then lead to something else. So like the food that a mother eats, those cells essentially become part of the baby. So that baby then is made up of that cow that died for that mother or whatever they're eating. So I think that's kind of like the way we would be reincarnated more, would be through that aspect, but not like my consciousness doesn't get like transferred to a rabbit.
Next question here. You're almost done. Two more. What gives life its meaning?
I think that's unique per person. Do you want that as a overall or for me personally?
Yeah, sure.
Oh man. So I think overall, I think everyone finds their unique purpose in life. And I think that's for everybody. I think we all, once again, the whole ecosystem thing, we all play our own little part in there. So I think it's unique per person. So like everybody has their reason for being alive. It could even be something so simple as like you're there to support comfort or provide comfort or pick up trash. Like someone has to do those things. It could be that could be your purpose, is to be the trash collector or whatever. Somebody that gets a random smile, like something like that. For me personally, I think it's tougher. Sadly, it's something I've not thought about as much as I probably should have. So the meaning for me, something really, I ideally would want to help the world in some way, and that's really like actually it's something I guess I kind of been struggling with, because I felt like I'm not doing that as much as I should. But like for right now, my position, that's been the rewarding thing. My position at work has been rewarding in the fact that like I work with a bunch of students, so like I help them in their aspects. So I think that kind of has given me meaning in that aspect. but I kind of want to transition that to more. And I want to really just kind of help people. So going with the MBA thing, to another aspect I want to, I'd like to teach, because I feel like that'd be something I can offer. I feel like I feel like I can kind of teach things pretty well. So I would like to do that, and I feel like that kind of would give me some type of purpose then as well, even if I'm doing like the game, like we talked about earlier. If I'm doing something like that, I feel like it doesn't really add to society as a whole necessarily. I feel like there's aspects of it that would, like, I think you said, like, people getting to reach out and being interactive with the world. I think it definitely is a positive, but that wouldn't necessarily completely fulfill my needs. So I think helping others would, through teaching or something like that, would be more beneficial as well.
Awesome. That's it, man. You made it through. Really appreciate you coming on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you.
Last thing here, if their interests were piqued, how would they find out more about you? How can they get connected if they want to dox you?
Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's exactly what I don't want.
No, I mean, if people want to reach out and they're like, "Oh man, that John guy, he's pretty cool. I'm interested in some of the things he said." Like, how would people find out more about you?
So that, I don't know. Like, my social media is always a good option. I'm not sure my thing about LinkedIn. I think my thing's John P. Gallo 1. But yeah, I mean, find me on social media. I definitely love to connect with people. Love to talk about all kinds of different topics. I'm definitely like a philomath to some degree, so I'd love to learn about all kinds of different stuff. So yeah, I'd love for people to reach out. That'd be great.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Contentious Talks. Did you like this episode? If so, consider sharing this podcast with your friends and family. To get notified about new episodes, please be sure to subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you want to connect more, like Contentious Talks on Facebook. To support Contentious Talks and for more content, consider joining the Contentious Collective for as little as $1 a month. To do so, visit contentioustalks.com today. Contentious Talks is produced, hosted, filmed, and edited by Ryan Malinowski. Contentious Talks, copyright 2021, all rights reserved.